Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast, where we dive deep into the media industry headlines and dissect the digital disruption that diverges the masses into the new media counterculture and away from the media establishment. Here is the king of podcasts.
Welcome to episode 236 of the Broadcasters Podcast, which dawns a brand new logo here on the program. If you haven't had a chance to go and look on where you get your podcast, you'll notice that I took some time and I really spruced up a really flashy logo for the program. I was working on something else for my full-time commitment for another radio show, trying to do a draft to use where when I work with a designer and I decide, we're going to do a show icon for one of our new podcasts, I'll take an idea and I'll roll with it. And I took this idea, and don't get me, it's not even close to it, but I took it from an old Doctor Who logo, and I said, let me just fork something on here, and let me see what I can do with putting a logo together for another radio show. Well, we didn't use it for that, and I never even submitted it to the designer, but I liked it so much, I said, let me go back into the drawing board real quick, take a little bit of tweaking, and let me put Broadcasters Podcast on it and see what happens. Changed the color scheme, took some background off of it, and it's nice and sharp. It's a good, flashy logo. I really like it, and I hope you guys like it as well. So on the program this week, we're going to go ahead and talk about the Stranger Things effect. Streaming movie soundtracks giving legacy artists a chart resurgence. Because what we're seeing is, besides new music discovery, when I talk about new music discovery, we're talking about new music, but new music discovery of music that has been prominent and very popular before at one point in time and coming back to the forefront is another story. That's the other part we have to go and talk about. Now, we've always known for a long time there have been movie soundtracks and TV shows that have always made certain songs prominent and popular. Okay, when you think about TV show themes, you think the theme from Friends, you think the theme from The Heights, you think maybe even the theme from SWAT. I don't know. There's a lot of different places to go with that. But what you think about is all these songs put together. I think about Family Ties, another great version, right? But the thing is, when you're looking at all these songs together, Miami Vice is another good example. You look at what various shows, movies that are going on right now that are bringing certain music to the light. And what happens? It automatically charts. It becomes viral. Same thing goes with certain music that comes off of TikTok and social media, but we know that's already been doing that. But something about the power and the value of something that is very popular, very viral on the mainstream side, and how they can still have some kind of presence on making music research once again. So when you look at Kate Bush and Metallica and what was done thanks to Stranger Things, well, let's talk about last week with Thor, Love and Thunder. Actually, 2 weeks ago. Thor, Love and Thunder getting Guns N' Roses back up into the forefront once again as well. So all these different things that are going on right now, we're going to talk about some of these stories about how this all comes about and the Stranger Things viral streaming strategy. We're going to talk about that from Billboard. Then we'll have what Guns N' Roses got as their contribution to be part of this part of Thor, Love and Thunder. And then we'll go ahead and talk about even Minions breakout hits as well with where things are going. Then there's other stories I want to bring up in terms of TV rewatch podcast being a push towards nostalgia. So not even are you going to get from the music end. The podcasters are also taking that nostalgic end to what they're doing as well. Then we look at the money in big midterm elections, which I know radio is very, they're clamoring to go and have right now because they need some kind of push of revenue to put towards their third and fourth quarter earnings figures, iHeartMedia, Odyssey, and the others. Then ESPN's Jimmy Pitaro talking about, will ESPN still have an existing cable channel down the line? Or is this still going to be part of cable packages? Or will it just be streaming alone? What's the future of ESPN on cable itself? Staying on, because it's very important if cable wants to be relevant anymore. Then TikTok adding content ratings now for overly mature themes. And then some news information about trusted news media, equal coverage, and then podcast listeners and how many of them listen to radio. And then also paying TV creatives at the end of ownership. We'll talk about all that here on the program. Thanks for listening in. Subscribe to the show as you always do. And by all means, I want to give you this heads up as well with all of my programming, especially with broadcasterspodcast.com. If you have any comments or anything you want to go and add to the mix, you want to send over to me, please go ahead and go to the website, broadcasterspodcast.com. I have a contact form now on the bottom of the page. If you want to send any comments, any points, questions, topics we should talk about, you want to be a guest on the program, I leave that to you. So go to broadcasterspodcast.com directly to contact me there. You can find all my social media links. You can find all my other content over there. Go ahead and check it out for yourselves. So let's get into it. Billboard talking about their music, about the music that's coming from the likes of Kate Bush and Metallica and what they've done here to bring music to where it is today. So Billboard talks about a Kate Bush moment for your song. So here's what we got for this. Their story says there's no way of predicting the stuff, but it's about moving super quickly. And there's a playbook emerging for turning binge TV curiosities into streaming hits. Now, here's what's being said right away. In this Billboard article, they say for exactly 1 minute and 17 seconds in the first episode of Stranger Things Season 4, Extreme's Play With Me is heard in the background as Dungeon and Dragon loving friends Dustin and Mike spectacularly failed to recruit new members to their Hellfire Club. Now, with that song, Shazam spiked. Fans on social media went crazy, celebrating the song and criticizing the series set in 1986 for using a tune which was released in 1989. Within a week, the track's on-demand audio streams jumped by 842% to 222,000 overall. And Primary Waves Management, digital branding and sync teams brainstormed on how to convert the momentum for the song, which never hit the Billboard Hot 100, into the prolonged streaming powerhouse following Stranger Things breakouts like Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill, A Deal with God, and Metallica's Master of Puppets. We talked extensively last week about new music discovery and how record labels and legacy publishers are trying to go ahead and take advantage of songs getting a new resurgence once again. It's a very popular thing. That's something that is very critical for the year 2022 when it comes to the digital disruption. This new thing here, where it's one of those anomalies that traditional media is looking for, to be able to repurpose, recreate, interpolate music and bring it back to the forefront once again. Because if there's nothing new that's coming out, there's not enough new coming out, then you have to rehash in the old. That's what they're doing right here. So one idea which will likely debut in the next few weeks is Play Along with Nuno, a TikTok challenge involving the fast-fingered guitarist for the band Nuno Betancourt, Extreme. Remember More Than Words and Wholehearted? Quote, when things happen like this, it complements what we do, coming up with creative ways to keep these artists on top of social media. That's according to the head of strategy and the partner, Primary Wave, Rob Dipple. We just try to keep the song on the public sphere. Syncs from Stranger Things have an easier time crossing over to become music streaming hits than it did in the early days of Netflix and binge watching for one major reason, TikTok. Since Kate Bush is Running Up That Hill, appearing in Stranger Things on May 27th, it's resulted in a total of 4 million Shazams to date, and a surge of TikTok memes incorporating the track have drawn millions of views. Scott Cresto, who's with Reservoir Media, says TikTok will respond to the TV shows. TikTok can create its own zeitgeist. Shazam's the first protocol. From that, label marketing departments jump to Spotify and Apple Music and see if those numbers are moving up. And if they are, they're going to put some marketing money behind it. With Stranger Things, the series' ubiquity made it easier to predict the impact syncs of Running Up That Hill and Master of Puppets, that how they would be on streaming and chart performance. They could predict it. The more difficult challenge for labels and publishers is to recognize when a track unexpectedly bubbles up from a lesser-known series. For instance, Selena's hits Baila Esta Cumbia y La Caracha, heard in Netflix's Selena series in 2020. And they took off as TikTok memes. The soundtrack would hit number 8 on the Latin pop albums chart. But these publishers, these music distributors working with artists and labels know they have to move super quickly. You know who doesn't move super quickly? Radio. Right. In less obvious cases, music companies need to use their own resources to identify under-the-radar hits from TV series and boost their performance. And when the numbers kick in and they see the streams are coming in, data teams at labels and publishers generally boost the tracks by contacting Spotify, YouTube, and others to encourage placement in more prominent playlists. So it's not so much payola, but it is influence, which, if the streamers are allowing influence, why doesn't radio do it anymore? See, radio does miss a lot by not having payola and having these corporate types control what's going on. The corporate type should take a payday. And payola should be brought in some way, somehow. But they're not. And we see it with certain songs that get put into prominent TV shows. Euphoria, for example, had a non-single from Sinead O'Connor's Drink Before the War, and it took off after airing on Euphoria. Sinead O'Connor did not participate on this. She was dealing with a family tragedy and personal illness, but the music choices in Euphoria generated numerous media reports, and the singer's Facebook page posted them repeatedly. And after the season's 4th episode in a single week, Drink Before the War hit 3.2 million streams and over 1,800 downloads. Stephen Pardo is digital marketing director for indie label Secretly Group, says the other thing to help syncing a song is starting an influencer campaign. Paying creators on TikTok, Instagram, and elsewhere to create content involving the track. If these efforts pay off, it's probably time to promote the song to the radio. See, radio comes in last. It used to come in first. Do we see the disconnect here, folks? I'm a radio guy, and I want to keep pounding this over the head over and over and over and over and over again because that needs to happen. Radio then will frequently ask how a song is doing on TikTok. You know, why are you worrying about gauging? Why don't you do it yourself with your audience? Where's the audience metric testing that you're supposed to be so good at? Why don't we do that here? Why is radio always so behind? Where are the programmers? Why is it always salespeople and all these corporate types that don't have anything to do with radio programming in the first place? Netflix, HBO Max, Hulu, and others have been tuning TV syncs into streaming hits for years. So Selena Gomez in 2017 recorded Yazoo's Only You for Netflix's music-focused 13 Reasons Why, which she executive produced. Then Euphoria took the power of music and the binge-watching, spawning numerous hits. One example was Moses' Some Needs Me in 20 Years, which streamed over 12,000 times before it aired on a December 2020 episode, 270,000 plus times afterwards, and an increase of 2,103%. Then you had in the latest Euphoria season, an older character flashes back to dancing to NXS in a bar, and one of the songs was Never Tear Us Apart, climbing up the charts in Latin America, with a corresponding boost on music streaming services. And NXS posted about the show on Instagram and TikTok, and released the 1991 live version of the song on YouTube, which landed in multiple articles. TikTok memes, of course, followed, and most often teenage girls watching the shows, they Shazam, and you see the numbers go up. The target audience on social media is the younger demographic, and the music buying audience. We're targeting these shows. Older music to a younger audience. And who was supposed to do that back in the day? 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, into the 90s? Radio. We can't do that. So Kate Bush is said to be the template. The press behind that got so big that there are people who discovered the song not from the sync, but from the press about the sync. It's gone beyond. Those are the moments we work towards. Kate Bush's song, Running Up the Hill, is still top 10 today. Like a brand new song. Timeless, poignant, fits the format of what the Stranger Things was all about. It just incredible what they've done. Another story in the same vein is Thor's Love and Thunder, which came out a couple weeks ago and has been doing what it has to do in terms of numbers in the box office. So Guns N' Roses right now are ruling the rock charts on Billboard. In Thor's Love and Thunder, there are a lot of songs that made it back to the rock charts after a long while. You had songs like Paradise City, Jungle, November Rain, and Sweet Child of Mine that all got featured in Thor's Love and Thunder. Since Thor's Love and Thunder's release on July 8th, fans of the Thor movie have been blasting Guns N' Roses music. To the point that Sweet Child of Mine was used in the film's trailer. And all these tracks saw a massive surge on Billboard rock charts. Right now, Sweet Child of Mine holds the number 2 spot on the Hot Hard Rock Songs charts, Hard Rock Streaming Songs, Hard Rock Digital Song Sales, all the hard rock charts. Welcome to the Jungle was the second track to regain chart momentum. Currently number 3, Hot Hard Rock Songs, Hard Rock Digital Song Sales, among others. And then there was a big thing where over 1,000 musicians called the Rockin' 1000 to celebrate the 8th anniversary. They performed Paradise City in front of a live audience in Paris. So there's more to this that goes on to see what happens right now. And then Guns N' Roses also had Carrie Underwood come on stage for one of their shows to perform some of their hits. And some of these artists are just finding ways to kind of just recreate themselves, rebrand themselves so they can be noticed again. As we know, the resurgence comes. Fleetwood Mac, again, the great example. Kate Bush, once again, coming out from the forefront. And people are just rediscovering her music once again. And there are other songs out there in the same vein. Let's talk about that. The Minions, Rides of Gru, I actually watched that, and it came out over the July 4th weekend. On July 1st, they released it. And star songwriter and producer Jack Antonoff was made to curate an entire compilation's worth of mostly contemporary artists, working with the likes of St. Vincent, Phoebe Bridgers, and Brockhampton, covering 70s classics. Plus, the Minions also performed the All For One song from the 90s, I Swear, also a John Michael Montgomery song, cover for John Michael Montgomery, and then All For One covered the song after that. I think it was 94, I forget. Well, the song made it into Spotify's Viral 50 chart earlier this week. So there's a chance that this 1994 version of the All For One song could go back up into the Billboard Hot 100. So this is the thing we talk about. When you look at what's being done with music, that TV, movies, labels, and publishers are working directly with these different outlets on traditional television, streaming television, and movies, and social media. Music's working with all of them. The record labels, insignificant. Labels and publishers, very significant. Radio, insignificant. And what are we going to do about that? What happens at some point to really take the point across and realize that things are just not going well in that realm? I want to understand from anybody, honestly, I would love somebody to come onto this program from the radio industry to explain to me, why are you disconnected so much? Why is it that if I look at your list, your media-based list of top 40 songs right now, how far behind you are on everything? Look at your top 10 right now going in these days. So you continue with the increase. Kate Bush is running up that hill. 6 weeks late? Maybe a little more than that. Actually, we're more 8 weeks late. And yeah, I know I should give a little bit of credence. Maybe 2 weeks after, maybe, second week of June, radio could have gotten themselves on there. Couldn't have been that hard, but they had to wait to be serviced by the music labels, or the labels and publishers that just thought, well, we're not going to worry about radio right now. They're not important. You are tertiary, not even first or secondary. You're the flea market. Do you understand? You don't matter anymore. That's your fault. That's on the corporate, private equity owned giants that are out there that are not paying attention, not with complete disregard of what's going on. So when I look at their top 10 right now, look at pop music on these radio stations. It's all over the place. They don't even have that many artists to work off of that are legacy artists they can put up there and promote. Like right now, Kate Bush is the 10th most popular song on media based in their top 40 chart. Then you got Lotto and Big Energy, but that's because of the Mariah Carey jump off in the remix. Dove Cameron's Boyfriend, which that took, how many weeks for that song to make it somewhere on that chart? Because that song, let me just look real quick. How far back are we looking at this with that song and how many weeks it's been on there? 22 weeks. 22 weeks. And the radio didn't have the push to even get it past number 16. So it's a top 20 single. It's a good song, but they missed the boat. They were too late to promote it. Then you got Nick Your Sunroof, which was a song that was on TikTok 6 months ago. And Bayhold, same thing, back in February, March, something like that. That song became something. Late Night Talking, Harry Styles. And by the way, that album's been out for a while. And the song has been out for 15 weeks. No, actually a little more than that. 8 weeks, actually, because of Harry's House when the album debuted 8 weeks ago. But they're kind of on top of that because of the fact that it is, well, as it was, is already a song that's kind of like making its way off. They're still playing it, but they couldn't help themselves. Late Night Talking had to be serviced as a single to radio because they don't have anything else. They need to play a lot of Harry Styles because they don't have any of their other legacy artists right now. No Billie Eilish, no Ariana Grande, no Taylor Swift. There's a lot of artists that are missing right now that don't have anything here. By the way, no Drake anywhere in here. Like, where is Drake? He's not even on here. In any song, no, he's at massive at 26. Beyonce's Break My Soul. You're telling me this song can't be in pop right now? Like, I mean, I don't know if the urban stations are playing it right now. Maybe they are pretty extensively, but media base? No, they're off. Right now, song's number 7. And it's starting to make a jump now, 31%. But the song's been out for 3 weeks. What are we doing there, huh? Anyways, if I look on their list even more, Doja Cat, Get Into It, yeah. By the way, that song, if I go back and look at how far, that song's been around 32 weeks. Since the album came out. You know, what are we waiting for? It's what they always do. Radio decides at such a last minute to go ahead and bring on this right here. Let's just go and bring everything on to get that song out here finally the radio. Well after the song's run. Just saying. And they're doing that before they go and promote Vegas, which is the song they should be playing right now anyway. But they're not. Of course not. And then you look at Jack Harlow First Class, which has been up there since the beginning because Jack Harlow's a legacy artist. They just push him with anything they can. He's so marketable for the pop audience. And Lizzo's About Damn Time Now rules radio. But that's also after, how many weeks was she out for? 13 weeks before they really put a rocket on there and try to push her up. Right now, she's the number 2 song on the country. That's partly to the radio. But it took them so long to get to that point in the first place. So I don't know what you say about that, what you do about that. But it's a complete disconnect, and it's total disregard. And listen, I should not be feigning outrage or be surprised. This is normal. This is typical. I shouldn't expect anything less. You know why? Because radio has other things on their agenda that they're more worried about right now anyway. Fred Jacobs right now recently wrote, and I forget, was it him as well? Let me look back. Yes, Fred Jacobs wrote about classic alternative as the next format, the new classic rock. So he brought this up. I wasn't going to bring this up. Why not? 5 years ago, classic rock was continuing to make ratings history, enjoying another strong summer of Nielsen ratings, especially in PPM markets. But there was a new old Goldface format they thought that was all going to be coming up very soon. Classic alternative. What a horrible name for a format. Just like classic hip hop. They can't help themselves. And, you know, I don't even know how that format actually worked for anybody right now. Just like there was Jam and Oldies. Remember those back in the day? Newly released data from Luminate reveals the 90s right now are the most popular decade of music. So they talk about Fred Jacobs talks about the last 5 years of radio and what's been important to them. Worrying more about classic hits than classic rock. Because they were both competitive among 18 to 34-year-olds. How many of those, by the way? And he says that over the years, there have been many different successful iterations of the original format, from classic hits to classic rock that really rocks. The classic alternative concept flows to the service every few years or so. And many alternative bands from the 80s that were more referred to as modern rock back then are still popular concert bands today, especially at all the various music festivals going on throughout North America. Artists like the Psychedelic Furs and Violent Femmes are part and parcel of the phenomenon that could be on the verge of happening. And that classic rock stations have beefed up 80s music on their playlists. And that there were a lot of bands that never got a fair shake when they first hit the music scene back in the 80s, especially in the States. And many markets did not have a true modern rock station back then. Well, also in the 80s, you also had a lot of hair bands, and a lot of legacy acts, and a lot of 70s songs that were still going to keep being played by the major arena rock artists that were still going to be prominent on rock radio. Because it was still like the overflow of the progressive rock radio days of the 60s and 70s. Now, he says here that for a new nostalgia format to succeed on a sustained basis, it needs a strong base of existing fans that loved and adored the music in real time when it was first released. That's not the case here. Just because music is old doesn't make it classic. So I don't know if we want to have classic alternative. 80s, 90s, classic rock. I mean, classic rock, just include the 90s music in and just dwindle down some of the 50s, 60s. I mean, dwindle the late 60s, the post-64 music, and take some of the 70s stuff out. Or what you do is you kind of move it away. Like in classic rock, you would just think that maybe later in the night, you play newer music, you know, towards the day part, afternoon drive, and the nighttime. I don't know, something like that. But there are some stations that do a good job of being classic rock and be only going to put this other music. Or just have a modern rock format continue. Like I always think about 96K Rock or K-Rock in Los Angeles that still do a good job of including new artists while playing the music that's very familiar. Seeing what they can do with it. What else can they do anyway? We're going to go into podcasting and talk about how there's a big market for TV rewatching podcasts. TV recap shows. And much like I do a show on wrestling, the Wrestlers are podcast, there are a lot of shows out there that they like to revisit TV programs that were live or taped, and they go back and talk about them on a pretty consistent basis, by the way. So iHeartMedia's digital audio group CEO, Conal Byrne, spoke with Yahoo Finance about the podcast boom, TV rewatch podcasts, and digital media creators and other audio trends. So there was a Q&A they did over here, and I'm going to just take from the transcript they talked about, that there are rewatch formats like New Girl and 90210 increasingly gaining listener traction. And Conal talks about that they sort of run the gamut. You have this really interesting phenomenon in podcasting. Inside of that, you have genres that are growing very fast: sports, comedy, and true crime. But one of those is what you flag is it's a bit of a surprise. Encompassing everything from companion podcasts to the biggest shows on streaming platforms like Bridgerton, they do the official Bridgerton podcast, the cast of all those shows that are now getting resurfaced on those streaming platforms, getting back together as an excuse to have a conversation every week, which, by the way, Netflix already did some of this with their own original series, having their own podcasts about those original series. The same idea where you see like AMC, they'll have post shows of their own series, Walking Dead or Breaking Bad and things like that. He says what he thinks is driving this is the resurfacing of older intellectual property and streaming platforms, but also sort of more interesting, the push towards nostalgia and connecting with friends through driving community and a whole new way through podcasting we didn't predict, but just exploded. And Conal goes on to say it's very important to segment out the industry. The names of companies that are out there doing podcasting are very different. Distributors in podcasting, the apps where you can listen to sound, the podcasts, zero economics in the podcast industry. They're just literally carrying through RSS feeds or shows to end users. iHeart is a publisher. They're the biggest publisher by a very large margin, 450 million downloads a month. So when they're able to talk to the folks like Malcolm Gladwell, or Shonda Rhimes, or Will Ferrell, or Charlemagne the God, their conversations are simple. They want to get them the biggest audience possible so they can monetize it as much as possible and distribute it everywhere that they show up, which is everywhere the podcast industry is today. And that conversation with creators makes it a lot of sense to have them jump in fast. There's obviously an audience for that. I mean, I see where they talked about the Scrubs series where Zach Braff and Donald Faison have gotten together to go ahead and do a show to talk about things. I know that Boy Meets World now has their own like revisiting podcast as well. I've seen that out there. And that's fine. Everybody can have their own things. And, you know, if you want to go and live back in nostalgia, that's fine. And obviously people are still watching and listening or watching all these programs on streaming somewhere, some way. And then they get to reconnect with some of their stars, you know, past their prime, and they're maybe a little more accessible. That's probably a good thing. And they don't have to go travel to a Comic-Con or to some other convention to go and see them or try to see them live and in person, which is nice. Now, I want to get into some other things. We're going to get past music and audio and podcasting and radio and all that good stuff right now. To move into some other areas, we're going to talk a little political time. We're coming up to election season. It's 3.5 months away. And it's the part that I want to avoid like the plague. But radio is going to make money on the elections. We already know that's going to be a big point for them. That's important to them. That's what they want. So we'll talk about that real quick. So we already have bookings now for radio to the sound of $2.1 billion. And total campaign ad spending for U.S. Senate, U.S. House, gubernatorial, and other races in U.S. midterm elections. Coming from the campaign ad scorecard, an ongoing tracking of political ad spending from Ad Age, Data Center in partnership with Kantar CMAG. They break down where all the money's coming from. And they make the point about how radio plays an important role in this media mix. And one of the people that's on here that talks about this story is Evan Tracy, Senior VP for Client Strategy at Political Ad Agency National Media. And he says that I've always been a huge fan of radio and continue to be. Whether it's 18 to 24-year-old males listening to sports radio for their gambling tips or news, traffic, and weather, those are still really reliable ways to reach likely voters. At the same time, two political consultants reminded this was a webinar that was being hosted recently by Marketron that talked about this particular story. And they said that there's a deliberate pacing employed by ad buyers, and radio is generally used later in the campaign to reach voters who don't make up their minds until late in the game. So radio can look forward to hopefully billions of dollars for themselves. Local over-the-air TV will get the most share of those dollars. Connected TV will be second place, and then over-the-air radio is third. But still, getting a chunk of that $2.1 million is more than enough for radio to get. But it's only a big chunk for a small amount of time. But they expect that, and they can use that to go ahead and play out into what their earnings results are and show that, hey, we're making money. We're not getting bankrupt. We're not getting more bankrupt. No, we're not, of course not. Sure. Now, I want to talk about newspapers here, because there's a number of stories that have come out that I've kind of held back on a little bit. We should bring up here in this case. One is about how nearly a third of new subscribers, they don't like their paywalls. So when they're doing that, they're basically going to leave in the next 24 hours. A paywall tech company called Piano, they're able to see from new data that a significant number of new subscribers cancel the digital subscriptions within a day. Piano is one of the largest paywall providers. They have giants like Gannett, Dow Jones, Meredith, and Axel Springer, and work with other companies experimenting with paywalls to drive subscriber revenue. They put out a report that says that subscribers who cancel almost immediately might have signed up to access a single article or found the full paid experience lacking after taking a quick look around. Because remember, some of these sites, you're getting a paywall for a short amount of time to get them to go and engage. And then that little limited time, they might get a trial period for a very deep discount. Don't like it, I'm getting out. So the report cautions that it's not enough to sign someone up and assume they'll consume your content. You need a thought-out plan using proven tactics to start forming habits early. Email newsletters, a welcome letter from the editor, mobile app downloads, podcasts, subscription benefits, reminders. A series of reminder emails over the first week and month have all proven successful with audiences. But this is becoming more common that will get first-day cancellations for newspapers or digital websites, digital news sites. It's more common among annual subscriptions than monthly ones, points to another reason for early churn. New subscribers are getting the cancel button as a way to turn off auto renewal. They don't want to forget they signed up for the subscription and accidentally be charged for a full price subscription, which is smart if you're a consumer. Another group flagged for high risk of cancellations are inactive subscribers. They are sleepers, paying subscribers who haven't visited the site in over 30 days. Piano said for the average subscription website, 40% are sleepers. The percentage of disengaged subscribers was reduced during the pandemic, but has risen steadily since the early months of 2020. So, paywalls, which we all hate, and people don't want to be a part of that and really deal with it in the first place. So, you know, it sucks for them, but that's what they are going to do because newspapers are greedy and they want to find whatever they can to continue to get money when their circulations are dwindling. But why is that? Do we want to talk about the real reason why people are so much very hesitant to go off of paywalls? Because also the content's not good. There's not enough reporting in there. And more importantly, they don't trust the news media. Washington Post talked about this today as I record this show. They talk about the trust in the news media and equal coverage. So there have been a pair of studies in the mainstream news media over the past week about Americans' trust or mistrust in reporters, and a curious gap between the public and the press on the question of whether all sides of an issue deserve equal coverage. So trust in mainstream news, television, and newspapers has fallen again. That's according to a Gallup poll. And at this point, there are probably exotic diseases that poll higher than we do, though we can take extremely modest comfort that Congress is even less highly regarded. 16% of adults have a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in newspapers. 11% for TV news. Meanwhile, Congress or our lawmakers in Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., 7%. Do we see all that being completely wrong? Do we see that? Amazing. 11% for TV news, which is fine. I get that part because people shouldn't really take TV news to heart. Maybe the local news, we've always said that's okay, but not so much this national cable news cycle. No, not at all. It's opinionated, all of it. And they're just keeping you fed with just a little bit of information, a little bit of nuggets of information just to keep you in to the loop all day long, which is their purpose. It's propaganda. They want to find a way to keep you retained, and they do a good job of some people to do that. If you add some confidence, 37% say they feel that way towards newspapers, 35% about TV. And traditional media, according to this writer, says, has been losing ground in two ways: the medium and the source. TV news still commands vast audiences, but go ahead and ask the 20-something, where do you get your news? And the growth of partisan media, particularly on the right, they say means getting news in 2022 might be synonymous with getting confirmation of prior beliefs. The news media can do a lot of things wrong. They can sometimes trust the wrong sources, make basic factual errors, disregard important stories and perspectives, focus too much on incremental politics, and stay stubbornly out of touch with our audience's daily lives. The list is long. That's absolutely correct, all of that. Let me get past the political part. Equal coverage. There was a survey pushed out by the nonpartisan Pew Research Center. They said in a new recent study that more than 3/4 of Americans, 76%, say journalists should always strive to get all sides equal coverage. 55% of journalists Pew survey studied, they said every side does not always deserve equal coverage, and 22% of Americans agree with them. So the journalists think that more than half of them think they don't need to be covering both sides of the story or all sides of the story. Let's just be clear about that. And 76% of Americans in this study said they should. Americans with low levels of trust in the media are more likely to favor the equal coverage aspiration, 84%, than those with higher levels of faith. So that's an interesting story what they said there. But the trust in the media continues to dwindle. which, regardless of what you think of what the media says, the numbers don't lie. Newspapers are falling, cable news ratings are falling, TV news ratings are falling, and that's just the way it is. But what we have to understand more than anything else is that people are responding with their money. They're not paying for paywalls. They're not sticking around and retaining subscriptions. They're cutting the newspapers like they're cutting the cable cord. Just the same way. And I'll take this story real quick to make my point. So what are people checking out themselves instead of the news? Well, they're watching streaming. They're watching television. They're not even watching network and cable TV. Because now we're seeing that streaming now accounts for more than 1/3 of television viewing. 35% of that pie still goes to cable, 22.4% goes to broadcast TV. And that move will continue to go more and forward towards streaming as we go along. Among the major streamers, 7.7% of those people streaming are from Netflix, 6.9% from YouTube, 3.3% from Hulu, 2.9% from Prime Video, 2% from Disney Plus, 1% from HBO Max. And this is from the Nielsen Corporation that put the study out. Oh, I forgot one other story that was on podcasting and radio that I wanted to bring up. I'll bring that up right now in the show. They talked about how many podcast listeners listen to radio still. And from a group called Veritonic, they're saying now that podcast consumers are actually multi-channel audio listeners. 7 in 10 podcast listeners surveyed say they still listen to AM/FM radio at least monthly. And less than 50% listen to radio streaming audio. Nearly 8 in 10 say they use music streaming services at least once a month. So what the idea is that where some people might get their podcasts, they're also getting their music from. And maybe like a TuneIn app, we'll be able to have more out there for people to go and catch on as well. They also found out that age is most significant for podcast listeners that stream music and listen to AM/FM radio. Listeners 55 years and older are more likely to listen to radio, and those in the 18 to 34 demographic are more likely to stream music. So all this interesting stuff that goes on. And then they were also asked which platform they would most likely listen to a podcast. YouTube is the most popular for podcasting, 62%. Spotify is second, 39%. Apple Podcasts and Amazon tied for third, 31%. And in their study, they also said that consumers 18 to 34 years old were about 26% more likely to use Spotify than other age groups. And men were more likely to use Spotify, YouTube, and Amazon Music to consume podcasts, while both genders are equal to use Apple Podcasts and NPR One. Okay, 3 more stories I want to go before I wrap things up for the hour. Jimmy Pitaro is the chief of ESPN. They had a programming over there, specifically chairman of ESPN and Disney's sports content operations. And he was asked about the flagship cable network ESPN, and he said recently that the network is likely to remain intact even as more of its audience gravitates to streaming video and direct-to-consumer outlets. And there was a thought that Disney could work to monetize the millions of dollars it pays in sports broadcast rights by making more of its content available on streaming properties like ESPN Plus or Hulu. Jimmy Pitaro says, "What I will tell you is that I sit here right now, the business is still incredible. We serve the sports fan anyway at any time, and there are a lot of people that still want ESPN in their traditional ecosystem. So if and when the time comes, we make ESPN flagship available to direct to consumer, make it available a la carte, or you can just go out and buy only ESPN when that time comes, we'll continue to be present in the traditional ecosystem. If you want to buy it through Comcast or DirecTV, you'll be able to." Now, what would be the thought process of broadcast rights for cable if ESPN decided to move off? And how much of a chunk would it take away for cable fees? I mean, cable would be kind of rendered useless if they lost ESPN, because then other sports outlets might do the same thing. I don't think anybody's going to fill the void of ESPN. But think about that. And then think about, cable might be able to go ahead and bring down the price of their cable service, but still, you're not getting a new audience that's going to replace that sports audience by doing that either. That's part of the thing they talk about too. He also says that ESPN in the not too distant future, he envisions an era when technology will make sports viewing more interactive, with viewers able to tap on a player and get stats of the game, or click on a player and buy a facsimile of their jersey or uniform, and suggesting a viewer might be able to even tap on someone and place a bet within the game. Well, that kind of information is probably happening down the line anyway, so don't rule that out. Another story from Billboard, TikTok is going to now add content ratings on videos with overly mature themes, which there's quite a bit of that going on right now. A similar rating system used in film, TV, and gaming. So now they'll add content scores to videos as part of a new feature to emulate ratings, just like I said. They'll roll out an early version of the feature in coming weeks and post an available message to block out videos that are age restricted. And to find out which ones will fall into that category, TikTok will assign a maturity score based on the video's thematic maturity levels. So they're saying that when we detect a video contains multiple mature or complex themes, fictional scenes that may be too frightening or intense for younger audiences, a maturity score will be allocated to the video to help prevent those from under 18 from viewing it across the TikTok experience. And they've also focused on further safeguarding the teen experience, and in the coming months, we'll add new functionality to provide detailed content filtering options for the whole community so they can enjoy more of what they love. Okay. That's interesting. I can appreciate that. I see where they're trying to go with that. Final story on the program is the end of ownership. I'll explain this real quick from Variety.com. They put a big feature story out. There's a storm brewing in Hollywood's creative community, as the latest unions and employers are preparing to wrestle on a new contract bargaining coming up. That there might be more labor strife in the 2023 round of negotiations with the Writers Guild of America, Directors Guild of America, and SAG-AFTRA, which we talked about during 2020. Or do I need to remind you? We did multiple shows on the union and the constant issues of striking that really changed the whole industry, and agencies and packaging and all that stuff going on was thrown out the window. A lot of more independence because you had more content creators working more on streaming platforms as opposed to traditional, and the whole packaging of having a director, producer, and all these other people in the same team, the agencies couldn't do it anymore. They lost their stroke. So we know that the formula that we're using is now outdated. It's outmoded. There's a growing income gap between richly rewarded A-listers and everyone else on the set, fueling indignation among rank and file union members. Remember, IATSE almost had a strike. But looming labor talks aren't the only explosive issue on the horizon. There's a lot of complications of why Hollywood deal making is so complicated. But the emotion that this heavy mood is provoking in the grassroots is not hard to interpret. Raw, unfiltered resentment, a source of generational friction among established actors, writers, producers, and directors. The highly fragmented TV ecosystem today isn't built to support long-running series that rack up 200-plus episodes. So now the Guild contractual TV series need a major overhaul. Right. We're not getting Dallas, which I'm still trying to get through 357 episodes in total, of which I'm now into the Dream season 9, where Bobby was killed, but we know he's going to come back in a dream. And I'm halfway through that series right now in season 9. Good stuff, by the way. I'm not missing Bobby, and I'm glad Miss Ellie's back, just so you know. They go on to say that at a time when everything is under scrutiny by cost-conscious conglomerates, veteran deal makers say the marketplace for streaming and content licensing deals is actually starting up to open in interesting ways. The explosion of production and the tumult in distribution economics has led to a much more dynamic business environment than a year ago, where ownership, licensing terms, and overall financial risks and rewards are open for discussion between studios, producers, and many streamers and networks. It's amazing what's going on here, folks, but we're back to the same thing once again. Here we go. The digital disruption and its mark on Hollywood continues to be prominent and noticeable all the time. The Writers Guild's most recent 3-year contract covering most high-level TV and film work expires May 1st. Directors Guild and SAG-AFTRA pacts run through June 30th. And the Directors Guild of America will undoubtedly be the first to engage in talks with the Alliance of Motion Picture Television before the end of the year. There's a whole lot more to say about this, but you get my point. We're going to see things happen because right now, all these content people, whether it's people that are working behind the set, writing a show, producing a show, directing a show, they're working on shorter series. And they should be able to work on multiple series if that's the case too. And the basic agreements and all the things that are going on, they all need to be reworked. So get ready for strikes once again sometime next year. I'm warning you now. I've done it the last time. We're going to talk about it again once it happens. And when we start seeing the rumblings of picket signs, Broadcasters Podcast will be there to comment on it. Just keep it like that. That's the show for tonight, folks. We're going to keep it right there. Just a little shy of an hour, but that's okay. I know you appreciate me taking the time not to go ahead and overload to an hour just for the sake of an hour. I could ramble on for it, but I'm not going to do that. That doesn't serve justice for anybody. But that's the show for this week. Thanks for listening in. I hope you appreciate the new logo. Quick reminder once again that if you want to reach out to the show, please hit the contact form now on the bottom of the page at broadcasterspodcast.com. You can do that now. It's on the footer of every page. If you want to go ahead and comment to yours truly, and I'll read whether it is back on the show or I'll respond back as quickly as I can. Thank you for listening in, finding the show as you always do. Come back for another Broadcasters Podcast, and until next week, remember that content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.